Tonight we are looking at 3 horrifying caving stories that went horribly wrong. In the Bahamas, the tide comes back 19 minutes early with 2 divers still inside the fracture. In South Dakota, a wrong crawl mouth 4 meters from the right one drops 3 cavers a level without them feeling it. And in Hungary, a meter of old snow lets go at once, and a river fills the lowest passage in the cave to the roof. Each story starts with confidence and ends in chaos. As always, viewer discretion is advised. On June 12, 2026, Nadia Whitcomb dropped through warm green water into Stargate Send, the deepest and largest inland blue hole in the Bahamas, a black fracture in the limestone of South ANDROS that runs down past 120 meters and breathes with the sea. She was diving with one partner, 60 meters down the fracture, 20 minutes of survey in the North Passage, and out on slack water before the tide turned. Nadia was 37 years old, a cave diver who had logged 800 dives across 14 years, the one the Bahamian survey teams trusted with tidal systems. Her habit was the watch. She wrote the slack water window on her slate in grease pencil before every dive, start and finish, because a blue hole, she told her students, is not a cave with a tide in it. It is a tide with a cave around it. The plan called for 60 meters, 20 minutes of bottom time, and out of the fracture before the flow came back. Here is what you need to understand about a tidal blue hole. The whole system fills and empties through its own entrance twice a day, and the water in the fracture moves faster than any diver can swim. At slack water, it is glass. An hour later, the same passage is a river running the wrong way. There is a window, and the window is the dive. The dive ran clean for 28 minutes, 2 torches dropping down black fracture walls, regulators hissing steadily on every exhale, a tank ringing once against rock at a constriction, the survey slate filling in the North Passage, and the water so still at slack that their own bubbles were the only thing moving in it. At the turn, they had 130 bar each and 18 minutes of survey behind them, the North Passage inked in down one side of the slate, and 40 minutes of slack water window still written in grease pencil along the top of it. 6 minutes into the swim home, that is when the window failed, because a storm surge 200 kilometers north had pushed the whole Bahamian tide ahead of schedule, and the flow came back into the fracture 19 minutes early. Nadia felt the water take hold of her fins and understood the arithmetic before she understood the feeling. What she didn't know, finning hard into moving water at 50 meters, the flow was still building and would not peak for another half hour. And that habit would now be the only thing she could trust, a window written in grease pencil, and the knowledge of exactly how wrong it was. Panic came in with the current. The window closed. The water reversed. They were trapped inside it. Nobody was going to swim out of that. Because this is the arithmetic of a tidal reversal. A fit diver swims about half a knot, the flood in that fracture runs 2, and gas burns 3 times faster against current than with it. 2 divers at 50 meters, 100 bar each, and a river between them and the only exit, running the wrong way for the next 4 hours. Watch a diver stop fighting a thing she could not beat. First, get out of the flow entirely, into the lee of a wall where the water goes slack behind the rock. Second, tie both of them onto the permanent line, settle on the bottom, and do nothing whatsoever while the tide runs, because gas spent swimming is gas gone, and gas spent sitting still lasts 4 times as long. Put yourself on that rock for 1 minute of it, water shoving steadily at your shoulder, a gauge you have already done the sums on twice, and a tide that does not care at all how long you can hold on. They sat in the lee for 51 minutes, breathing as slowly as 2 people can breathe, and watched the silt stream past them the whole time. Neither of them spoke, because a regulator conversation cost gas nobody had. At 60 bar, Nadia moved them up to 40 meters, where the fracture widens and the current runs weaker. 10 meters of progress that cost 11 minutes. The flow slackened at the top of the flood, exactly as the table said it would, and they had 8 minutes of workable water to cross 40 meters of open fracture. They took it, hand over hand along the permanent line, tanks scraping the fracture wall the whole way, and a valve clanging once on rock, and made the entrance chamber with 30 and 34 bar. Nadia surfaced into green Bahamian afternoon 2 hours and 40 minutes after entering the water, on a dive planned for 55 minutes. Both divers survived on 51 minutes of sitting perfectly still, and the survey group's report ruled it an early flood driven by a distant surge. Teams there now check offshore weather as well as the tide tables, and no diver enters the fracture without a slack window margin of 90 minutes. The deepest blue hole in the Bahamas still breathes with the sea twice a day. Still runs glass at Slack and River an hour later. Nadia dives it every season and now writes 2 numbers on her slate, because 2 divers were trapped in that fracture for 51 minutes and surfaced on 30 bar. A blue hole is a tide with a cave around it, she says on the boat. You cannot swim through a tide. You can only wait it out, and you had better have the gas too. On March 8, 2026, Ben Halloway walked down a concrete stair into the cold dark of Wind Cave, the densest cave maze on Earth and the 3rd longest in the world, where more than 200 kilometers of surveyed passage are packed into roughly 1 square mile of South Dakota Hill. He was surveying with 2 others, 3 hours in through the middle levels, 6 hours of work in a new lead, and out before the park's last shift went home. Ben was 38 years old, a survey caver who had logged 15 years and 90 kilometers of passage in this system alone, the one the project sent into anything genuinely 3-dimensional. His habit was the ceiling arrow. At every junction he pointed his light up and photographed the boxwork pattern overhead, because in a maze this folded, he said, the floor lies to you but the ceiling never repeats. The plan gave them 9 hours underground, 3 lights each, and a station-by-station survey out the way they came. Here is what you need to understand about Wind Cave. It is not laid out like a cave. It is laid out like a sponge, stacked in 5 levels that all connect to each other, so a passage can run above the one you were in 10 minutes ago. The walls are covered in boxwork, thin blades of calcite standing out of the rock in honeycombs. It is beautiful, and it is unhelpful, because at a glance every honeycomb wall looks like every other honeycomb wall. The survey went well for 5 hours. Boots scraping over dry breakdown, the tape ticking out and reeling back, water dripping somewhere below the floor, station flags going up as they pushed the lead north and east. At the turnaround they had 400 meters of new passage in the book, 5 hours down, and a straightforward walk back through 11 surveyed junctions to the stair. 2 junctions into the walkout, that is when the route failed, because a low crawl they had come through on the way in had a second identical mouth 4 meters along the same wall, and Ben led the group into the wrong one without anybody noticing. 40 minutes later, the passage they were following did not match anything in the book. What he didn't know, standing in an unsurveyed corridor with 3 lights on the wall, they had dropped a level without ever feeling like they were going down. And that habit would now be the only way back. A photograph of every ceiling he had passed under, in a cave where no 2 ceilings repeat. Panic moved through all 3 of them. The book stopped matching. The walls looked identical. All 3 were trapped. Nobody knew which level they were on. Because this is the arithmetic of a folded maze. 3 cavers were somewhere inside 200 kilometers of passage stacked in 5 levels, and a search party would have to walk all of it to find them. 3 people off the survey, 9 lights between them, and a park service that would not start looking until the shift ended, 6 hours away. Watch a survey caver use the one thing a maze cannot copy. First, stop walking entirely, because every further step is another junction to unremember. Second, open the camera and go backwards through the ceiling photographs one at a time, matching boxwork patterns overhead against the screen in his hand. Put yourself in that corridor for 1 minute of it. Honeycomb walls that all look the same. A survey book that has stopped describing where you are, and a phone screen with 40 photographs of ceilings on it, one of which is the way home. It took him 90 minutes to find a ceiling that matched, and it was 11 photographs back, which told them exactly how far wrong they had gone. They retraced it junction by junction, checking every ceiling against the screen before committing to a passage, moving at about 1/3 of walking speed. At the 4th match, one of the others put a hand on the wrong wall, and Ben made the whole group stop and re-photograph before they moved again. 5 hours after the book stopped matching, they came up through a crawl they all recognized and stood in a surveyed passage 40 meters from the stair. They walked out past the last tour route at 10 at night, before anybody on the surface had thought to worry about them. Ben sat on the concrete steps in the cold and scrolled back through 40 ceiling photographs, one at a time, for a long while. All 3 cavers survived on 90 minutes of standing still and 40 photographs of rock, and the project's review ruled it a route identification failure at a duplicate crawl mouth. Both mouths now carry a reflective station tag, and survey teams photograph junction ceilings as standard practice. The 3rd longest cave in the world still packs 200 kilometers of corridor into a single square mile of hill, and still stacks its passages 5 levels deep with no sense of going down. Ben surveys there most weekends and still photographs every ceiling he walks under, because 3 cavers were trapped in that sponge for 5 hours and 40 photographs is what got them back. The The floor lies to you, he tells the new ones on the stair. Look up, then take the picture. On March 30th, 2026, Emil Vargas walked in under the Great Arch at Agtelic and into Baradla, the longest cave in Hungary. 25 kilometers of passage carrying an active river that can flood to the roof in an hour, draining a whole plateau of farmland through the hill. He was surveying with one partner, 4 kilometers in along the show route, then down into the low Streamway for 6 hours of work and out the same evening. Emil was 41 years old, a survey caver who had logged 18 years in the Agtelic system, the one the Hungarian club called when the Streamway needed measuring. His habit was the stick, a peeled hazel rod jammed upright in the gravel at the Streamway entrance, marked at the waterline, because a river cave, he told them, will tell you what it is doing if you give it something to write on. The plan gave them 10 hours underground at the end of March, with the plateau above still holding a meter of old snow. Here is what you need to understand about an active river cave. The passage is the drain. Everything that falls on the farmland above arrives here, and it arrives with a delay of hours, not days. The low Streamway runs a meter high in normal conditions, and takes the whole river when it rises. There is no high ledge in it, no air bell, and no way back except the way you came in. The survey went well for 4 hours, boots splashing through ankle-deep water, the tape ticking out and reeling back, gravel grinding underfoot, both of them working steadily down the low passage with the river running quiet beside them. At the turnaround, they had 600 meters of Streamway measured, 4 hours down, and a 2-hour walk back to the hazel stick and the way out. An hour into the walk back, that is when the plateau failed them, because 5 days of warm rain had been working into a meter of old snow above the cave, and the whole snowpack let go into the sinkholes at once. The water at their boots went from ankle-deep to knee-deep in the time it took to walk 40 meters. What he didn't know, standing in a rising Streamway a kilometer from the show route, the river was still climbing and would fill that passage to the roof within the hour. And that habit would now be worth everything and nothing at once. A hazel stick marked at the waterline, 2 kilometers behind them. Panic went through the pair fast. The water rose, the gravel moved, both were trapped. Nobody above knew anything about it yet. Because this is the arithmetic of a low Streamway in flood. A caver wades at about 2 kilometers an hour against current. The passage roof is a meter above the gravel, and the river was rising faster than they could walk. 2 cavers a kilometer inside a filling drain, a roof 1 meter up, and a river behind them that had already decided how much of that meter it wanted. Watch a man who read rivers for 18 years read one last one correctly. First, abandon the survey gear, all of it, because weight is time and time is the whole problem. Second, send the lighter and faster of the 2 ahead alone, because 2 people moving at the speed of the slower one is how a cave takes both. Put yourself in that passage for 1 minute of it. Cold water climbing your thighs, a roof you can touch without straightening your arm, and a current pushing you gently, steadily, back the way you do not want to go. His partner made the junction with the show route in 50 minutes, with the water at her chest and the roof close enough to scrape her helmet. Emil was perhaps 200 meters behind her, moving slower, and the last thing she heard him call was that the stick would still be standing and to check what it said. She reached the show route, ran 2 kilometers to the surface, and had the Hungarian rescue service in the entrance within 90 minutes. The Streamway ran full to the roof for 19 hours, and nobody could enter it at all in that time. They found him on the second day, 300 meters from the junction, in a section where the roof comes down to 80 centimeters. Emil Vargas drowned in a low Streamway in the longest cave in Hungary, 300 meters short of a passage he could have stood up in. His partner survived and reached the surface in under 2 hours. The hazel stick was still standing when the water dropped, and the mark on it was 11 centimeters under the new waterline. The inquest ruled the death drowning, following a rapid thaw-driven flood, and the Hungarian Federation changed one rule that spring. Nobody enters the low Streamway between February and April, and a snowmelt gauge on the plateau now reports to the club by radio every hour. The longest cave in Hungary still carries a whole plateau of meltwater through its middle every spring, and the low Streamway still fills to the roof with no ledge anywhere in it. The club surveys it in summer now, and there is a steel post where the hazel stick used to be, with his name on the collar. His partner survived. The inquest report runs to 90 pages. The Streamway ran full for 19 hours. A river cave will tell you what it is doing, Emil used to say at the arch. Give it something to write on. Then go back and read it, because 300 meters was the whole margin.